The CAREC Resilient Power Series is an effort by CAREC to demonstrate the leadership of the women and men of the Caribbean in the electricity sector, as we are working to build, not only handle the disruptions that are occurring because of COVID-19 and the upcoming hurricane season, but also for us to demonstrate our leadership and what we're doing on the ground and taking control to manage. And for those of you now joining, our panelists today are Mr. Lincoy Small, who's Director of Systems Operations, Mr. Dwight Reed, who is a resource planner with JPS, Mr. Orlando McCoy, who is Director of T&D and Asset Optimization, dealing specifically with the smart grid, and Mr. Ferris Stewart, Manager of Reliability and Asset Optimization. So closing that poll, I'm going to share with the team. 65% of you said that reduced energy demand was the biggest impact. 19% said worsened reliability measures, and 54% said worsened collection of sales. So, panelists, does this surprise you?
Not really, Martin. We do expect that based upon the measures that a lot of the governments have taken, we expect that some element of reduction in demand. Reliability measures also, I believe, based upon the restrictions, will inhibit a lot of the response from the utility, and sales also restrictions on the populace. So I'm not very surprised at the results.
Yeah, I'm not surprised either. Let's issue the other poll though. So the other poll is: has your level of electricity service been affected during the pandemic? Panelists, what the audience has said is that 66% actually said no, and then 29% said yes, 5% were unsure. And I guess this is a factor depending on where you're from. What are your thoughts on this from what you've seen at JPS?
Well, as the grid operator, as a manager for our system operations that manages the entire grid, we have not seen any significant impact on the reliability of our supply. Right? In fact, that is one of the areas that we're looking to touch today. Right? So we are more in line with the majority who have responded as well. In fact, we have actually made experience, are trying to make the experience a little bit better.
Okay. Well, that's awesome. Well, I don't want to hold back from the presentation. So I'm going to make Ferris the presenter right now.
Okay, thank you, Martin.
You're welcome.
These are difficult times. Pandemic is now added to climate change and natural disasters as utilities' greatest concerns. While we grapple with the challenges of COVID-19 pandemic, inherently, the electricity grid has actually been prepared for situations like this. With the advances made in smart grid technologies and artificial intelligence sometimes down the road, we will ultimately see human interventions being minimized on the grid. So we'll share JPSCO's own experience as it relates to our proliferation of smart devices, our plans, and the benefits derived. Before we do, we look at JPSCO at a glance. We're an investor-owned utility, 80% majority owned by Marubeni and East West Power. Total installed capacity, 940 megawatt, with JPSCO owned generation, privately owned generation, with an energy mix of thermal units, wind, solar, and hydro. The network consists of approximately 1,200 kilometer transmission and 11,000 kilometers of primary distribution lines. We serve approximately 650,000 customers. We operate within a legislative and regulatory framework through the government All-Island Electricity License and the oversight of the Office of Utility Regulations.
JPS is a key contributor to our national energy policy. We recognize the role that we have to play as an organization in establishing the vision of making Jamaica the place to live, work, raise our families, and to do business. But this is not the only driver that pushes us or encourages us to move along the line of establishing a smart grid. We do have business challenges, and these business challenges aid our business case in developing and rolling out our smart grid infrastructure. So let's talk a little bit about the journey and how we have transitioned along establishing our smart grid. So in 2013, we started with what would have been our traditional grid. We would have visibility through our SCADA system at the feeder level, meaning at the substation level. But in 2013, between 2013 and 2015, we started piloting distribution automation technologies. We integrated that with our SCADA system and was able to bring in remote fault indication to the SCADA center, which was actually a big leap for us, moving from visibility at the feeder level to the sub-feeder level. In 2016, 2018, we augmented this by introducing sectionalizers where we could automatically sectionalize the main trunks of the feeder. To supplement that, we also implemented an advanced distribution management system. And also that year, we started focusing on the laterals, the smaller sections of our feeders where we recognized that we were having significant challenges in the number of outages there. So we introduced the trip saver technology in about 2016. The same period, we also started the rollout of our smart meter project and also our smart streetlight project. To test both of these technologies, we actually developed a smart city in our key business district where we're able to implement these technologies and actually see how they would work together before the rollout. Shooting forward to 2018 to the present time, we have continued the rollout of these technologies, but very importantly, over the last 2 years, through development and implementation, we installed a 24.5 megawatt energy storage system and hybrid system consisting of flywheel and also lithium-ion batteries. We started the piloting of a new wide area network to supplement our distribution automation devices and backhaul for our smart meter and smart streetlight system. And we were able to also introduce to our customers a web portal that will offer them the opportunity to see what their usage, energy usage was on a periodic basis, which I believe is the way that we need to go as utilities to offer customers that opportunity to get data when they need it. So where are we today? So after going along the journey, at today's date, we're about over 200 smart switches on our network. 2/3 of all our streetlights have been converted to smart streetlights. About 45% of our customers now are outfitted with smart meters. We have nearly 800 trip savers and 400 fault circuit indicators. So we have been going along a journey, but I want to mention not only the journey that we have taken, but the benefits that we have seen from the investments that we have made. It is very important to understand that the technology by themselves do not provide a total solution. And first we'll elaborate later in the presentation how these solutions work together to provide that benefit. But before we go down that road, we're going to talk a little bit about the framework, the regulatory framework under which we are operating.
Okay. Our reliability performances are guided by the regulatory framework through the Office of Utility Regulations. We have adopted the IEEE industry standards, the incentive mechanism for improved quality of service, two-factor, and these quality of service factors are based on customer-based indices, duration of outages, SAIDI, frequency of outages, SAIFI, and customer response, AIDI. There is also an exclusion for major event days in our reliability reporting, and the license makes provision for force majeure exclusions. So let's look on our 5-year historical performance. for TND network. As you can see, with the proliferation of our smart grid technologies, along with other reliability initiatives, we have seen a progressive improvement in our frequency of outages. So we started with reference to 2015 and 2016, a 17% improvement in 2016 over 2015, and there's a gradual improvement culminating in a 49% improvement over the 5 years for safety. And the same trajectory follows for the duration of outages. So now let's look at our 4-year average against our 2019 performance. Again, we can see noticeable improvement in 2019 performance frequency outages when compared with the 4-year average. And the 4-year average 2014 to 2018. It's important to note that it was not all smooth sailing, because as you can see, there are variations. These variations are due to the fact that our outage profiles are seasonal. But from time to time, we will encounter operational issues in the field in our learning of these smart devices. So let's look at our network resiliency and reliability planning. With the proliferation of these devices and the massive amount of data coming in from these devices, we have to look at a more scientific and innovative way in planning, removing from situations where we had a traditional grid and a lot of manual planning was taking place. With all of the technologies and the information, we now had to look on procuring proper industry tool to assist in our planning. So our methodology principally is based on the utilization of our Dixlent engineering analysis software. With the penetration of these smart grid devices, this software allows us to model the reliability benefits, and not only the reliability benefits from the installation, but also the feeder extensions for grid flexibility and transferability, and also to look at the optimal placement of these devices to achieve maximum reliability benefits. We also looked at our business plan, the approved projects from our Office of Utility Regulations, the asset health indexing studies, which shows the health of our assets so that we can strategically plan areas that needs most maintenance. We looked at historic profiles, analysis of our historic performance, versus performing feeder modeling, and most importantly, key stakeholder consultations. So while we model a network in Office and look at all the different inputs, we see the consultation as a very important area to assist us to meet our reliability objectives. So again, with the data and the massive amount of technologies that we're seeing over a period, we had to look at the integration of the technology with the processes and the human resource to see whether we had the capacity basically to manage the influx of this data. So we had technologies, the enterprise asset management system, the geopal workforce system, the smart grid devices, data from the smart grid devices, ADMS. So we looked at a training, technologically advanced training and development programs for the smart grid and emerging technologies. Data analytics, the influx of data analytics is now becoming one of those major areas which we are focusing on. So we also had to create our business unit realignment of our organization to meet these needs. As it relates to processes, we had to revise our traditional process. For example, traditionally, when there's a power outage on the grid, the system control would notify our field crew to patrol the extent of our distribution circuit. Now, for example, with the introduction of all circuit indicators, we're able to pinpoint the location of these outages. Hence, restoring the customers as soon as possible. What is important to note is that we had to revise these processes to get the field to understand and align itself to the expectation.
So just before you move on first, just want to highlight the very, very key point here that we want to bring across is the fact that not only do we have these smart devices, but the culmination or the combination of our human resources, the technology and the processes need to come together so that we can have the full benefits of the smart devices. And that's something I believe that is a lesson that we have learned, and I believe that we have done quite a bit in terms of addressing some of these points. But just for the audience, it's very important for us to pull all these things together to get the full benefit.
So we compared the COVID period with 2019 corresponding period. And outside of the normal variants, we'll see that there is little or no impact for the COVID period. What is important to note is that during this period, there's a limitation in terms of the number of planned outages that we're able to execute due to the work from home scenario, as well as restrictions and lockdowns in certain areas. So this is a reflection that our technologies are working and our processes are working to ensure that the customer gets good services during this period. So what is our experience? What is our experience during the COVID-19 period? We had 4 quarantine zones, and to the extent that we had an area in Spanish Town, we had a total lockdown of our operating districts. So there we had to draw on all our technology benefits to ensure that we maintain service to our customers. Meter reading, we were able to basically extract meter readings from our smart meters. As it relates to other operational activities, we were able to maximize on the benefits of these installations. And this was similar to other operations island-wide. For example, our remote measuring devices were able to reduce the crew dependency on electrical data for their operational planning. The trip saver technology, approximately 60% of our outages occur at the lateral level. So with the trip savers, we're able to minimize the amount of sustained outages on these line sections drastically, to the extent that we saw reduced truck rolls due to reduced outages that served us well during this period. Meter reading, we had reduced meter reading touch points for meter reading and for power quality capture. As it relates to our fault circuit indicators, we're able to maximize on this technology to zoom in on these faulted locations to prevent crews patrolling the extent of line sections. And our distribution automated switches, they serve us well in that the system control now has the visibility to conduct remote switching to ensure that we maximize on the flexibility and transferability of the network. So what are the lessons learned during the period? As you understand, the home is now the workspace, the school, and somewhat the healthcare facilities, because we're seeing a number of persons now using the home as quarantine isolation points. So there was actually a higher level of service expectation from our customers. The importance of big data analytics to guide organizational decisions during the pandemic. So we had to rely a lot on data to test the pulse of the organization so that we can guide our organizational decisions. The need to accelerate customer self-care services to minimize customers' touch points. And this again is very important because with the work from home scenario, many customers are tracking their bills, their usage. So we had to, the lesson is to ensure that we can proliferate this across our customer base so that the customer will maximize on this self-care service. The need for periodic pandemic simulation to address readiness of operational occur processes. What we did was to activate our pandemic plan. So this was pretty new, unprecedented. Hence, one of the lessons learned is for us going forward to have simulations to ensure that we put ourselves in a state of readiness should another pandemic occur.
So a very key point here that Chris has raised is in terms of having those customers have those touch points, those self-care touch points. And he mentioned earlier we had a wide-scale lockdown in one of our major operating areas within the island. And what that meant is that through the smart meter, we were able to get the meter reading. But what has happened is that we needed to provide that opportunity, or we provided that opportunity for customers to use online services for them to pay their bills. But what we realized that not all customers have opened up or used these channels or have the opportunity to have these credit cards or debit cards to facilitate the transfers. So what we're saying is that this pandemic has said to us that it is important that customers have these various different avenues for them to make their payments and also to take care of those needs that they would require during the pandemic. For example, energy usage and such and other information like that.
Okay. So in summary, the pandemic events have now joined climate change and natural disasters as scenarios for grid resiliency and reliability planning, and a greater need for grid reliability and stability as customer demand fewer power interruptions. JPS has improved planning methodologies as a result of smart grid technologies, and the integration of these smart technologies with the integration with human and processes required to optimize operational benefits. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. Really like the presentation. I really appreciate that you gave a kind of an overview of the regulatory scenario in Jamaica, because I think that is, even regardless of this scenario with COVID, I feel like the regulatory framework to allow innovation to be absorbed is where the Caribbean will be focusing and has been focusing recently. So at this stage, what I want to do is see if there are any questions from the audience for Orlando and Ferris at this point. So audience, if you have questions, please submit them via the question box and I will share with them. I see one oh, here they are coming now. It was Jermaine Andrew asked if the SAIDI and the SAFI are calculated in minutes.
Okay, they're calculated in hours. So we did a conversion.
Okay. And we have, how does JPS plan to institute the higher degree of digitalization needed given drops in revenue due to economic activity?
So I believe one of the measures that we are currently undertaking, it might have been mentioned in the presentation, was the use of GeoPal software. We recognize that there are opportunities here to make our processes even more efficient. So what we have been doing is in terms of transferring those manual and paper-based process through our work management software. We started initially with a GeoPal software, and now we're in the process of upgrading that to a more robust work management solution. And the plan is for this solution to be the key software to execute work across the entire operations.
And thank you very much, Orlando. We have a flood coming in. Some of them are even better suited for for the energy storage piece. But we have, how is COVID planning different from natural disaster planning from what you've seen?
Okay. What we had experienced, there are a lot of factors that emerged out of the COVID experience. So actually, we had to revise our planning methodology. We met with the key operational stakeholders, and we look at those factors, example, things like adjustments in budgets, the ability of staff availability, the reductions in planned outages execution. So these are all factors that we have to take in consideration to ensure that we basically achieve our reliability target.
I think first, just to add to that, I think one major difference is with a hurricane, with our weather forecast, we have an idea in terms of what is coming and when it is coming. With the pandemic, while we understand the nature of the pandemic and how the infection, the rate of spread of the infection, the challenge that we do have is that as a utility, we have to respond according to many of the measures also that are instituted by the local, whether health authority or the government. The challenge you have with that is many of these measures may be sudden. So as a utility, we need to be flexible to be able to respond in time to some of these decisions. So I think that's a big area for us, flexibility that we need to have. So our plan must be robust enough to be flexible to respond to the measures that are instituted.
We had two questions related to communication. One was, what mix of communication backhaul infrastructure does JPS use? And then, what is the role of telecommunication in implementing a smart grid?
All right, so firstly, the backhaul mechanisms that we're using, we have our own, first of all, we have our own communication infrastructure for SCADA system and other devices on the network or offices, etc. But in addition to using that as backhaul capabilities, we also have used locations. We have used our local third-party provider for communication need. What we have recognized also is that these, depending on a third-party presence, there are advantages, but there are also disadvantages to that. Where we can, we use our own resources, but what we have recognized is that there's still an area where we need to roll out additional wide area network resources to facilitate that backhaul or to facilitate the level of reliability that we need. For part B of the question, the communication background is an extremely important part of a smart grid. Many of the technology based on communication. So having that reliable backbone, communication backbone is extremely important in terms of rolling it out.
Thank you very much for that. I'm gonna field one more question, and then before we do our poll leading into the next segment, it's more around training, guys. They would like Jermaine would like to know, was the training for data analysis specific to only T&D staff or inclusive of other departments? And that question actually merges with another question that came in around what has been the impact of introducing smart technologies on the workforce and also in general in terms of kilowatt hour price, because COVID's situation is may speed it up.
All right, so in response to our data analytics, installing over 200,000 smart meters that are able to give you 50 energy interval amongst other data provides you with a large amount of data. Added to that, indications coming from smart streetlights that are providing various measurement quantities, power quality issues, presents you with a large amount of data. When we started looking at that, the initial purpose for our smart meters was to look and and use the data to determine how we would use it to reduce our non-technical losses. But as the data came in from the various different smart devices, we realized that there was an opportunity to leverage this information to enhance the efficiencies in our operations. So initially the team would have, there was a team selected as analysts looking at this data, and the initial focus was losses. But after recognizing the volume and the gold mine of data that we had, that team now expanded the viewpoint beyond just losses and to look at the entire organization, how we could actually use this data to enhance the efficiencies. So the truth is, looking on it, what I would say is that if any utility going down this road, we need to have a broader perspective, much broader perspective in terms of how we use that data, and have not only T&D persons, but you must also have a core of persons who specialize and who are able to mine that data to produce the type of information that you require. Can you repeat, Martin, the second question?
Second question was like kind of the impact of introducing the smart technologies on the workforce and in general, like the price because of the COVID situation speeding up the process of getting the. I am assuming what the person means here is the process of training up teams and getting them familiar with your segment of JPS's work is what I am inferring from the question.
Okay, so many of our smart technologies are primarily driven through our business cases. Prior to even COVID, they could stand on their own. The smart meters, we had a significant we had a significant challenge with non-technical losses, and the smart meter project itself brings that level of benefit that will help us to address it. So by itself, the projects actually are economically viable. And so what the pandemic has done is really just kind of reinforce as an organization that the decisions that we have made, the spin-off benefits, the additional benefits that we are getting from these technologies, what the pandemic has done is really reinforce that these are good decisions that we have made. So what we're seeing during the pandemic really are many of the spin-off benefits that these projects have given and demonstration of the core benefits we're predicated on. The organization themselves, what we have done even prior to the pandemic is really to have nationwide training, not only our T&D personnel, our operations persons, but organizational wide in terms of looking at persons getting exposed to what a smart grid is, what the elements of a smart grid are, and for persons to be involved in the process. So not just our operations team and our T&D team, but also the wider organization.
Oh, thank you, Orlando and Ferris. Just in the essence of time, I'm going to hold some of the questions that have come in because some of them are around levels of cybersecurity and also about renewables and storage. So what I'll do is now issue the poll for the next segment and make Linkoy the presenter in the interim. So the question that we'd like to hear from the audience now is, do you have any plans to implement energy storage in your jurisdiction? The results demonstrate that there have been quite a few people who are planning to do storage projects, 44%, and then 36% have already implemented storage solutions, and 21% said no. Are you surprised by that?
No. The world is actually moving in that direction, right? And a lot of island utilities, that's the focus now to use renewables to manage the proliferation of renewables that are coming on the grid. So that is not surprising to us at all.
What might be a little bit surprising is the amount of people that have basically no plans to implement the energy storage. So that would be interesting to see, the makeup of those systems. what are their plans going forward, especially if they plan to integrate any amount of renewables?
Yeah, yeah, storage is definitely the hot topic, and we will have more on examples throughout the series.
All right. Well, good morning again, everybody. So we're going to jump quickly into it. The name is Lincoln Small, as Martin has said, and I am the Director of System Operations, which is the group that is responsible for the entire grid management in Jamaica. So we're going to walk you through a little bit of the grid operators' experience, what is happening in Jamaica, especially as it relates to key announcements that came during this pandemic. Now, on this that you're seeing is a comparison of energy profiles. Let us put it as that for now, with purple being the energy profiles that would be seen within this year and blue, same period for last year. So just so that I don't lose anyone here. Right? What you'll be, so in a sense, each one of these pumps represent one of the 4 weeks within the month of March. And what we also did is to compare similar days within the month so that you can understand or see the direct correlation of the patterns. If, for example, what you wanted to see was that March last year looks like March this year, then the blue line would be superimposed on the purple line. So let's disregard the first 2 weeks from now. The first COVID case in Jamaica on the 10th of March, right, on a Tuesday. And so it was represented right here. So these 2 weeks, you saw a slight reduction in demand based on looking at the purple line, right? And that was due to some temperature impacts that we were seeing at this time. It's pretty interesting to note that the behavior, the patterns of persons or people, right, affect the demand profile that we see at the grid at any given point. One of the key things to note is at the start of the 3rd week. So at the start of the 3rd week, the government, prior to that, the government would have announced the first COVID case. There would have been an announcement of lockdown of schools, of areas where that case was located. But critically, at the start of that 3rd week, we saw where a general work from home order was declared. And what you saw as a result of that was that the purple, the energy demand for 2020 started to fall significantly when compared with the blue for 2019, which kept trending up at that point. So a lot of persons might be saying, oh, but we're at home, we're using more electricity, we're probably seeing this in our electricity rates. But what is happening now, when the work from home order came, more commercial and industrial activities were shut down, right? Because people now generally start to work from home. So yes, you will lose using more power at home, but the net effect is that the overall impact on electricity would have been reduced because commercial and other economic activities would have slowed down. Pretty much it got even interesting at the end of that 3rd week, where we saw the shutdown of most of the religious and recreational aspects of our country. And what you saw here is that the weekend demand profile and the weekday thereafter even fell lower. So this showed you just the patterns of the different announcements which came in the country, how they impacted the demand profile on the grid. Skipping forward quickly to April, right, we saw whereby we continued that same pattern of low energy demand when compared to the green line, which represents April 2019. A key point to note is that at the end of the 2nd week, or on that holiday weekend, going into that 3rd week of April, right, we had a massive increase in our COVID cases due to what is called a workplace cluster. Right? We went from almost 25 cases to somewhere about 500 plus in a matter of 2 to 3 weeks, right? Just due to that workplace cluster and other persons that would have been impacted. And as a result of that, we saw the demand even fall further. So at the end of April, we saw almost an 8% reduction in our energy demand when compared to the same period last year. What does this mean for you everyday customers? On a 24-hour period, what used to happen on a weekday in 2019 is that our demand profile over 24 period looks like this. This part would be typical your 8 to 5 people working. This will be the transition period of people going home, and then you go into the peak, and then it falls off again. But to note, in April 2020, what we saw here is there's a 50 megawatt reduction, right, in demand due to the work from home order and some of the lockdowns that were in place. Likewise, it was similar for the weekend, where there was almost a 40 megawatt reduction in that demand. So people started overall to use less as a country. One of the most interesting things that also happened here is that they are very innovative people. So even though there was a shutdown of nightlife on the weekends, right, we're looking at 2019, in 2020, we started to see where the peaks in the weekends, they expanded out a little bit further out to about midnight instead of falling off rapidly. This was due to the creation of a lot of virtual kind of parties and family kind of entertainment while being at home. So what does this all mean? How does this impact anything? What's the story I'm trying to get to here? So what I've been talking about here is the reduction in overall demand of electricity. As utilities, one of the things that we are planning to do is to expand our renewable portfolio by adding more renewables to our grid in order to pass on those low cost savings to the customers, to reduce the level of carbon emissions. But there's a con side to introducing too many VRE plants on your grid at one time. So we would have developed futuristic plans of controlling our renewable penetration levels as demand grew. What happened as a result of COVID is that the reverse obtained. You would have all renewables on your grid, right? And then you'll be planning that as demand grew, how you would grow your rate of renewables. What happened now is that with the same renewables that you have on the grid, shrinking demand, it means penetration of renewables on your system, or on our system in this case, has actually increased significantly. And with that con, there are some challenges at times that you have to deal with in managing variable renewable plants. And variable renewable plants here, I'm talking about wind and solar. Sun doesn't always shine and the breeze does not always blow. And whenever those plants drop off, then you have to deal with the issues of replacing that lost energy from a wind or solar plant. Let's look a little bit at this. So looking at this table here, and we're looking at April 2020 and comparing the same period, April 2019 gray, April 2020 is now orange. When you look at, especially around the holiday weekend and simultaneously with the announcement of that lockdown around this point, you realize that the orange bars actually far outweigh the gray bars of last year. So using almost the same wind this year as we did and solar that we used last year, right? We realize that the orange bars far outweigh the silver bars or the gray bars of 2019, meaning that our renewable penetration levels almost doubled just because the pandemic has impacted our demand. Right? Likewise, you can see it here. What that has done is that how the grid operates is that in order to pass on the maximum benefits of renewables to our consumers and to our customers in our country, right, we tend to take the power that renewable plants generate first, and then after that we use the power generated from other plants, from thermal plants, traditional plants that use oil. So if you're looking at 2019 right here, the peach or orange, just like guys don't know colors, right? But I call this peach right now. Right? This peach would have represented the thermal energy that we got in 2019, and you saw hills and valleys of renewables. The blue represents hydros, right? All through the different weeks of April 2019. Back to 2020, right? Because of that reduction in demand scenario, a lot of those values actually went away. And you even realize also that the blue lines started to shrink, because currently right now in Jamaica, we're going through a little bit of a drought situation. However, the green started to dominate the orange. right? And hence we start to have more influx of renewables on the grid. To put it in a different sense, let's look at this chart here. On the holiday weekend and on the time of the lockdown. So what you're seeing here is that the green bars represent the net increase in renewables in 2020 versus 2019. Look on the corresponding impact of what happened to the thermal plants. The thermal plants, for every increase, positive increase in renewables, you saw a corresponding net decrease in thermals, right? This will be good to everybody saying that, yes, we're using a lot of renewables, but remember the con aspect that I introduced, right, about the renewables. Renewables on our grid do not provide us with something that we call voltage support and management, which is sort of the lifeblood that keeps the grid alive. In fact, if we were to rebuild our grid once more, one of the things that we would do in our policies and our decisions going forward is to ensure that a lot of these variable renewable plants, and I'm talking about wind and solar primarily here, would be allowed to deliver reactive power into the grid. That is something that is being addressed currently by our ministry and our IPPs in our RP that is to be completed soon, to say that going renewable plants produce voltage support on the grid. So that's not happening now. So hence it's a challenge. And one of the things that there are some of the challenges that could have been introduced if the situation was right. Now you're running a little bit too much renewable plants, you're running a less thermal plants, and the thermal plants are good at providing that voltage and that reactive support whenever you have any major incidents. As a result, whenever you are having major incidents, right, due to renewables, sometimes you might have to find yourself running expensive generators, which can start or come online much quickly, right, in cases when you lose wind and solar. In addition to that, as I mentioned before, you'll have significant problems in managing voltage on the grid, right, which is a no-no as a grid operator. So the key thing I said here is that the title of this slide is Could Arise. One of the things we did in 2016 when we went on our mission to start our energy storage, implement our first energy storage pilot on the grid, with the kind of assistance of the ministry and the regulator, right, is that we looked a little bit in the future to say that let us not only use to manage the intermittency caused by the renewables, meaning when the wind drops off, you put more power into the system to make up for that loss. When the solar drops off, let's not just say that, okay, we're going to have a perfect marriage of and energy storage. One of the things that we said that, okay, most energy storage plants, the concept at the time was to keep both in the same location. One of the things that we actually did is to say that, okay, we are going to also use our energy storage to give us some additional benefits, right? One is voltage management, right? And the other one is a manual operator type of control, which would see us putting our energy storage facility in the area of the grid that would need that better voltage management or stability should these thermal plants be brought offline because there's just no space on the system, right, to accommodate them. And as a result, we implemented our energy storage system in December 2019, which was a hybrid energy storage system. Hybrid meaning it was a combination of lithium-ion batteries as well as low-speed flywheel. And what this helped us to realize for JPS and to our customers is reduce benefits, reduce O&M costs, which we pass to our customers, improve system reliability, meaning that whenever renewables actually drop off the grid or any other plants, then you will not be losing or having power cuts as frequently as what used to happen offline, right? And we will also be having quick responding in reserve. But guess what? Don't just take my word for it. There was an example of what happened in the pandemic as to how we actually use our renewables to manage some major grid events in the system. In fact, our storage system delivered on the benefits that we had initially proposed, and as we say in Jamaica, it even gave us braka, right? We got more for our buck. So that's one thing that we are actually proud to say of our project. In fact, we are seeing 97% improvement on our SAIDI and 86% improvement on our SAFE, which would have been caused by the drop-off in the variable renewable plants. So the purpose of our energy storage system is to not only complement the proliferation of renewables, but also to ensure that as a matter of grid resilience, there is energy storage there to save the grid from any other system events separate and apart from renewables. But Dwight will go through a scenario that happened to us now just to show you how storage actually saved our lives. So Martin, probably at this point, we can share a question with the audience.
Yeah, this is the last poll. Thank you so much, Linkoy. That was very insightful. And you have a whole set of questions coming in, so I'm saving space for the end. So the last question is, what are the potential applications that you are using storage for? Is it frequency control? Is it peak shaving? Is it renewables smoothing? Or is it spinning reserve management?
All right, so currently we're using our energy storage for frequency regulation or control, right? It also the part of our spinning reserve.
Yeah.
Also with steady and
sorry, Linkoy. I meant that's the poll question we asked them, but
I'm jumping the gun here.
yeah. We don't want any responder bias.
Right. When I'm talking about storage here, it just leads me to a level of excitement. So sorry, guys.
That's good. That's great. No, we love it. As you will see, gentlemen, 50% of the respondees said that they're using it for renewable smoothing. 20% said frequency control. 23% said spinning reserve management, and only 7% said peak shaving. Now, is that surprising to you?
No, it's not surprising. As I said during the presentation, one of the things that would have been a lot of persons to actually incorporate storage in their grid is to manage the intermittency challenges caused by renewables, especially more towards renewable smoothing, where renewable smoothing is basically whenever the wind and solar is dropping off aggressively, the storage would actually inject some power into the grid to ensure that drop off is not as sharp and significant that it will create disruptions to the grid. So that was the major mindset, and probably still is for most persons in implementing energy storage, to ensure that they can increase their renewable penetration portfolio, but not have a sudden shock on their grid whenever the intermittency challenges arise.
Right, and even further to that, Martin, in terms of the peak shaving, that peak shaving has a lot of attractive features, but it's just really the cost of implementing an energy storage solution for peak shaving. I think that is what would basically, dissuade a lot of people from trying to implement it for that kind of solution.
Okay.
The results are in what we're seeing.
Well, I've gone and I've gone and made you the presenter now, Dwight.
So morning again, everybody. Right now, I'll just bring you through an example incident that occurred in our system during the pandemic. Right, and this was made somewhat worse because of the high renewable energy penetration at the time. So to give you a better appreciation of the incident, just give you a general overview of how our system is structured. So the diagram here is more or less organized geographically. So in the top left is like the western side of the island. You can see we have combined cycle plants down there, as well as some gas turbines. The middle top at the north, where we have the majority of our hydro assets. The lower left now is more towards the center, or that would be now the northwest, where we have more combined cycle plants, our combined cycle plant. We have some medium speed diesels, and we also have the majority of our variable renewables located. So our wind and our solar assets. And right now, that is where we have the major load center. So this is to the east, where our capital is located. And we also have some generating units there. And but more importantly, we also have our hybrid energy storage system, our HES, located there. So throughout the presentation, you might hear me refer to it as a HES or just the energy storage, right? But it is the same thing, right? And as Lincoln alluded to earlier, the location of the HES here is basically to help with other issues not necessarily fully related to managing the renewables. So it is able to do a very good job managing the renewables, even though it's remote from it or from them, but also provides additional things that I realized by having it here. And so that is just a general overview of our system. And we can just bear in mind again that our variable renewable resources, they do not provide any kind of voltage support. So the voltage is high in the area that they are, they cannot help you to reduce it. The voltage is low, they cannot help you to increase it. Right? And the power they are producing at the time, basically have to take it. So they are take as available. Right? And Lincoln already pointed out in terms of the advantage of that, just trying to get the customer the lowest cost energy at all times. All right. So let's look on the day in question now. So the day in question was a Sunday, so it was Easter Sunday, April 12th. So generally on a Sunday now, we would expect the demand to be low. But as Lincoln showed, because of the pandemic now, on the weekends, we're also seeing a further almost 40 megawatts decrease in the demand. Now, the renewable sources didn't hear about the pandemic, so they are still pushing out power at their maximum. As long as it's available, it's being pushed out. So the net result of this is that we can have a very high renewable energy penetration. So much higher than we would have been planning for at this very moment. Right? So that is one of the key things that this pandemic has shown. So on the day in question now, the total demand was 436 megawatts, and this was made up of thermal, or 294 megawatts, and then renewables at around 142 megawatts. So the renewables, as we discussed earlier, made up of both hydro and the variable renewables, which are wind and solar. So generally, minute by minute operations, hour by hour, we consider hydro to be more or less stable. But so we just call it a renewables or hydro. But the variable renewable plants now, the wind and the solar, they can change their outputs in seconds, in minutes. And these can be some very wild swings. All right. So this was the day in question. The penetration of the variable renewables, so it's just the variable renewable section, doesn't include the hydro, was around 30%. So this is on megawatt power at the instant, right? So this is immediately before the incident. And our lowest transmission bus voltage was around 1 pu. So we were looking good. So this diagram will just kind of giving you a general idea of the voltage profile across the system. So you can see the outline of the country, and then these spheres now just broken up in the west, the central, and then the east. Right, so the east with the major load centers, on a day like this, we'd have the majority of the generation somewhere here and here. So in the center and in the west. Right, so we'll be importing a lot of power into the east. So here comes the incident now. So what happened is that a thermal plant in the center of the island quickly reduced its output and then tripped offline. So the net result of that now is that we lost a lot of the real power from it, and we also lost a lot of the reactive power from it. So we lost our voltage support, and so we started experiencing low voltage in different parts of the transmission grid. Now in response to that loss of that plant, we'd have the governor response from the other thermal plants, as well as our frequency response from the energy storage. So these would have acted to try and arrest that frequency decline and to stabilize the system. And because of the nature of the trip, where it was a quick ramp off, our system operators were also able to carry out some manual load shedding. All right. So the effect of all of this now is that the frequency stabilized, and the grid voltages saw a slight improvement. So I can just carry to this figure right now to just show you an example of our storage response to that decline in frequency. Right, so here the orange line is the storage output, megawatts output, and the blue line now is the frequency of the system. So right here at the beginning of the graph, these small variations from the storage, basically from the flywheel. So the system is actually set up that the flywheels would act first to handle the minor changes in frequency, because the flywheels are able to manage the heavy cycling without having much degradation in terms of their storage capacity. But batteries, on the other hand, now, the more you cycle them, is the more that they will see a reduction in terms of their maximum capacity that they can store, and so that their lifetime will be lower. So the hybrid system was chosen to give us the benefits of the batteries, but to also use the flywheel for the smaller variations so that we don't have to heavily rely on the batteries. So you can see from the plot now, as the frequency is declining, the flywheels are trying to help. But as the decline becomes worse, then we start to get that big output from the batteries themselves. And you can see that the frequency now stabilized at around 49.5, which is around where we have the set point for the batteries to kick in. So the result of the batteries now is that they will then help to kind of stabilize the frequency around this point, giving our operators a chance to bring other assets online or to take any other kind of action. All right, so we were not too bad at that point, but then to make the problem even worse now, we lost a key transmission line. So then this now resulted in a further reduction of our grid voltages. So this now with the overview of what the system looked like immediately after the incident. So remember that we lost that thermal plant, and we also carried out some manual load shed. So the total demand is a bit lower than it was before. But what we see now is that the renewable energy sources are basically constant, because we're talking about a very small period of time here. So the result of that now is that we have an instantaneous jump in terms of the megawatt variable renewable penetration to 32%. So 32% is something that we were seeing, later on, as the government adds more renewables to the grid to further lower the cost of the energy. And then we would have other plans in place to basically manage that. But at this moment, we weren't really expecting such a high penetration. But because of the pandemic, the demand goes low, renewables stay up, the penetration is high. So the result of all these actions now, the loss of the generating plant and the loss of the transmission line, our lowest bus voltage was around now 0.94 pu. So this is outside of our tolerance, which is plus or minus 5%. So at this point now, we have risk of other generating units tripping. So some action has to be taken immediately. So this is now just a similar plot showing you the voltage profile across the country immediately after the incident. So we can see that now we lost the generator somewhere here. We have a decline in voltage there. And then the east side now, where we have the major load center importing a lot of that power now, we have a further voltage decline. So you can imagine that the lowest grid voltage was somewhere. So what can we do in that short period of time now to remedy the situation? So this is where the energy storage system comes in. Right, so the details of it now is it has a 24.5 MVA capacity. So this capacity is available for both real power or reactive power, as long as you don't exceed the total MVA capacity. So in terms of the real power, the breakdown is 21.5 megawatts from batteries, and then 3 megawatts now from the flywheel. Now, the main features that helped us out in this particular situation is that the storage now is remotely controllable by the operators in the control room. So they see the grid event, they see the current situation, and they want to remedy it. They can just easily click into the SCADA system and just tell the energy storage system how much either real power or reactive power to dispatch. And like I said before, that entire 24.5 MVA capacity is available. So they can do real power, reactive power, or they can do a mix of the two depending on the situation. And whatever they select, that will be available immediately to the grid. So there's no waiting on a machine to start up and then to be synchronized to be able to stabilize the grid. And the net effect of all of this speed now is that they're able to reduce the amount of load shed, and the amount, and if we even have to shed any load, then that load will be shed for a shorter period of time. So it's a win-win for the customers. All right, so operators now use the storage, give us about 20 megabars of reactive support. So this is the system immediately after the storage was used. So it was used, brought into play very quickly. So the system parameters are more or less the same. The megawatt penetration of VRE is still at 32%. The demand is still around 409 megawatts. But now with the addition of this additional megabars or reactive power support, where we're able to increase the lowest transmission bus voltage now up to 0.98. This is not perfect, but it's definitely within tolerance, and it's definitely a better position than we were before. So this now is kind of giving you a voltage profile when the HES was brought into play. So as you can see now, in the eastern side of the island where the HES is located, we were able to get a slight improvement in the voltage up to that around the 0.98. Right, the central still remained low, but still within tolerance, close to about 0.95, 0.96. And of course, in the west now, we were good because we have generating assets over here, and they are concentrated in the load center here. All right, so we can just do a quick flick through. So this is immediately after the incident, before the HES was brought into play, and then this is when the HES was brought into play. So you can see the big impact that it had. And we're able to restore customers and get the grid stabilized in a much quicker fashion. So this is one application of the HES that is not related to the energy storage aspect of it, but it's just in terms of the capabilities of the inverters and other systems that make up the HES. So in the considerations of having energy storage, which we saw before, a lot of them are related to renewable management, frequency control, and so on. We can also consider that we have other benefits. So even though some people are not considering using any kind of energy storage, you can add these additional benefits now to the playbook. So then you might reconsider using it in some more kind of creative ways. So that is basically it. So I guess we can take some questions now if you have it. So over to you, Martin.
Great. Thanks a lot, Dwight, and thank you, Linkoy, and thanks you to all of you actually. So one of the first questions that we had coming in was, if you, knowing what you know, how would you, if you could build from scratch, how would you rebuild the grid?
Right. So I think Linkoy alluded earlier.
Yeah. So one of the things that we can. So I showed you in the presentation, Martin, that we can actually, if we were to rebuild the grid, similar to Dwight's presentation, where currently, not all of our IPPs right now that are wind plants are solar are able to provide us with reactive power to the grid, right? So if we could do things all over again, we'll ensure that you would have ensured that every VRE or any plant that actually gets to the grid is capable of providing reactive power output in addition to the real power output on the grid. In addition to that, one of the things that we could probably even have done on the T&D side, and I think Paris and Orlando alluded to it, is the creation of more redundancies. Typically, things come with costs. It is not a matter that they were not done because of an unwillingness to do it, because at the point in time they might have cost more than they would have cost today. But in terms of building a lot of redundancies in our network, probably down from what you call from an N-1 to an N-2 level, to ensure that with losing a line or a substation or a distribution feeder or generation plant, you have insufficient systems in place to always guarantee supply to the customers The only problem with that, as I said, is that always comes with a cost. But the good thing about what we're seeing in the electricity sector now is that the price of certain equipment and services is actually falling, right? So if we are today, and you tell me that using today's current rate and prices and the technology that we have, that we can do certain things over again, building more levels of redundancy and improving the reactive capability of a lot of our VRE plants, something that we don't know. Because we actually have some VRE plants that might have that capability now, but they are not necessarily, there's no general mandate for all of them to provide it.
Thank you for that. We actually had a question come in, as well, like learning from this experience with the pandemic. Do you think that it would be future PPAs, given what has happened with the pandemic, should be included in force majeure?
So that's an interesting question, all right, and probably that's one of the lessons we have learned. In fact, we see even where in Jamaica, some utilities have actually applied for force majeure and have it approved, because this is a particular scenario that we have never seen before. And in fact, one of the intents from us as well as a company to apply for that, because it is very challenging right now to provide the same levels of service, to live up to the same levels of standards that we have been expected to live up to in blue sky. And I'm sure it's the same with generating plants. So in going forward, you don't know what other unforeseen events might come up, right? But it is probably a good to have, should in case the unforeseen happens.
Okay, and the other question, you mentioned about redundancy. Selton asked if it is possible to make it mandatory that independent renewable power producers implement storage devices to mitigate against significant reduced outputs.
Ask that question again, Marty. You weren't clear.
Sorry, no. Selton asked if moving forward you would make it mandatory for IPPs delivering renewable generation to have a storage solution along with their generation capacity.
But one of the things that might be challenging where that is concerned is that asking a new provider to incorporate storage might actually come at some additional cost to that overall project, right? And it might get to the point where if storage was implemented, if the cost of that storage was so high that if implemented along with the project, it would actually cause the overall project costs to be no longer competitive with other thermal units or existing technologies out there. Then what could be good is if there is a centralized kind of ancillary support service, probably provided by the utility or the grid operator at a wholesale rate, so that yes, you can accommodate the IPPs with their different renewables or VRE technology, and then using the different kind of applications for energy storage to complement that, so that the customers can leverage the benefit from those plants until we get to a point where, let us say, that the cost of storage gets so cheap and competitive that when combined with VRE installations, then it will be even more competitive or at a cheaper cost than other technologies, right? So that is how you can actually roll it out on a phase basis, and then so you can set up storage separate and apart from an IPP now as an ancillary support. But then over time, as costs become cheaper to implement certain resources, then that could be implemented as a combination of a VRE and an energy storage system.
Right, and to add to that, there are considerations that could be made in terms of putting certain specifications on the VRE plant. So you might tell a plant that your maximum maximum ramp rate has to be X. And they can take whatever steps they need to take to ensure that. Might include installing storage, but it might include other measures, and it does not necessarily specify a technology of the storage. So for arguments like a solar plant, you might consider building that plant to higher than contracted capacity. And then you use that extra capacity now to kind of manage your ramp off if you experience a kind of shading event. So more flexible option without say include storage.
That's interesting. You know, like I had another question since, you know, you mentioned that you guys were looking to the future, and the question came in around, since we're looking to increase renewables when moving into 2030, what is the plan on controlling the VARs and reactive power on the grid on the other load centers that now have thermal units?
All right, so I can start. So essentially, I think I alluded to earlier, we're now pushing to have the renewable plants be able to provide some amount of voltage support. So based on their locations and so on, they'll be able to provide that VARs that we would lose from the thermal plants that they would displace. And in addition to that, like I was saying earlier, we have some additional benefits of energy storage. So we might decide to install just a portion of the energy storage system, say just the inverters with minimal battery or energy storage capacity in the different centers to basically act as static VAR compensators or STATCOMs. Be functioning like very high performance capacitor banks. They have a lot of advantage over capacitor banks in terms of their ability to provide that voltage support even when that VARs, even when we have a very low voltage event. So capacitors notoriously, their VAR support decrease with the voltage across them. And that is an unfortunate reality of capacitors. So with the STATCOM, we'll be able to provide that kind of reactive support throughout the.
They had a question come in on my WhatsApp regarding the smart grid. What was the most surprising reveal for you, Orlando? And like, how can people reach out to JPS to learn how to implement smart grids themselves? Is that an option? I think you're on mute. Hold on. You're on mute. Yeah, okay, you're good now.
Okay, thanks, Martin. So I think one of the greatest reveal for us, I think in the beginning we did focus a lot on the implementation of the technology itself. The biggest reveal, I'd say, is the integration of the various different elements, the human element, the changes that are required to the processes. For example, I mean, making repairs to street light, a regular street light as opposed to a smart street light. The approach is different. In the past, we would have had probably nightly patrols to look at lamps that are out. Right now, where we can sit on a desk and have that information at your fingertip. Not only that, we also have the information that we can determine more than likely what the issue is at the location. So I believe that for any persons implementing the smart grid, do not undervalue the change that is required on the human level and the change that is required in the processes in terms of addressing it.
I really appreciate that. And, you know, like, I might sound like a broken record, but the whole idea with the CAREC Resilient Power series is for us to learn from each other, because, you know, there are projects throughout the region that are at different stages. And JPS, you guys have been doing the smart grid for a while, and you have this novel system that has, you know, the flywheel and the battery solution combined. But there are others out there who are moving towards that. And I know, Lenkoi, you always say to me, you know, like, that we have to pool our ideas. I just feel personally, now it's more important than ever if we're going to reach resiliency at scale across the region. I know we're at time, so I just want to say thank you to all of you for joining. You know, putting this together really relies on the community, the CAREC community, the other utilities, and JPS will also be featured on another webinar looking at how they plan their personnel for the hurricane season. So disaster site management at a future date. And we'll have other utilities. But if you are at a utility and you feel you have a topic that you want to hear or a solution that you want to share with the other utilities, please reach out via the CAREC community. And if you're not a member of the CAREC community, that's where all the presentations will be held and hosted. And you can also reach out to the presenters on there. And you can sign up for it at community.carelec.org. And I apologize for the technical difficulties in the beginning, but this has been one of our largest webinars since we started in 2016. So again, a round of applause to JPS team, and thank you for your presentation.
Thanks for having us, Martin.
For sure.
Yeah, man, thanks everyone for attending.
Yeah.
Thanks, Martin. You take care and everyone stay safe and stay healthy.
Indeed, indeed. And we'll keep updating the community. We want this to build and carry momentum. So looking forward to this summer and the innovation that we have coming through from the region. You guys be safe and let's connect, collaborate, and innovate together. Cheers.
Cheers.
Thanks. Bye-bye.